welcome Courtney to the stage. I'm so excited for you all to hear from her. She's just an incredible person. She, as you know from her bio, she's a writer, journalist, gatherer, anti-racism coach. She's just the most kind and lovely human being. And I'm so impressed by her thoughtfulness as she crafted this talk. She spent some time with one of our volunteers, Blakely, and put together this video. And if you didn't see it on our Instagram, I think it's a wonderful introduction to her and what she's going to be.
I think overall, as a Black woman in the South, you're not supposed to say anything. That's the advice I want to give for Black women, Black young girls out there, is to vocalize your feelings, your desires, your pleasures, your emotions. All of that deserves space. It deserves to be voiced and shared, and it's not something that you have to bury and keep to yourself.
Thank you for letting me share that with you all. And I think that that empowerment is something that I'm excited for you all to experience. Her words are so powerful. If you can unmute yourself, please do that. And let's welcome Courtney to the stage.
Thank you guys so much. Okay, listen, Blakely, you did that shit. Like, that was like the coolest thing. I saw it and I was like, a commercial for me? This thing is so cool. So Blakely, you win. Vishali, you win. And everyone here, thank you so much for having me. So today, my speech, my presentation is called Give Matriarchs Their Flowers Now, which is based loosely off of the latest Boss magazine that was just released this May, and is going to be kind of a continuing theme in my work for a little while. But I want to just tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about my family, and why this is so important to me. I grew up in a family of trailblazing women, powerful women, and persevering women. I'm going to show you a few pictures, okay? So this is my maternal grandmother seated here like a queen. This is Laura Eleonora Langford Parker. She was college educated and brilliant and aspired to be more and do more than the service work that Black women were often relegated to in her time. When a secretarial position opened up at the US Naval Academy in her hometown of Annapolis, it was the perfect opportunity to do what she wanted to do. You could see the Navy Stadium from the home my grandfather built on Melvin Avenue. When she called to apply, staff said that the position had been filled, yet a few days later, the position was back in the paper. My grandma and her amazing father, a little bit scary, but super cool, ended up suing the Naval Academy for discrimination. She won and got the job. And then a few years later, she moved on to work for the Pentagon. My paternal grandmother, who I have a picture right here, is Lorraine Melvin. And she became the breadwinner of her family as well. In Bladen County, after physical and mental health problems made it impossible for my grandfather to work, and sometimes even impossible to live with, my granny took any job she could find to provide for their 5 children. She picked blueberries and tobacco. She cleaned people's homes and buildings, and she watched white people's children. There was a time when she owned a restaurant, but her habit of giving food away to whoever needed it made business ownership a little unsustainable. So flash forward to spring of 2018, I held a community conversation in partnership with a progressive activism group called AFAR. The subject of our discussion was Wake County's affordable housing crisis. I was in the middle of a housing crisis myself. I was actually living with my parents, me and my husband and 2 kids, as we're looking to buy our first house, which took about 9 months total to find, and 6 offers that fell through before we found the home that we're in now. So I was writing a little bit before then. I really wanted to go to journalism school, but in 2017, I found out I was pregnant with my second child, and we were in no financial position to make school happen. But on that spring day in 2018, several women attended the conversation and were seated in the front row.
Mhm.
Those women would proceed to speak powerfully about the ways the crisis had impacted their neighborhoods and how their calls for change had been ignored for years by the very people seated in front of them. They recalled stories, conversations, email exchanges, and the loss and displacement that was destroying the places they called home. As I came to know the women at the event, I learned that they had been advocating for fair and affordable housing for decades. Their work had helped save some of the neighborhoods, but not all. I tell you these stories because the question rooted in our theme is, what would it be like if women ran things? What I've learned over the years is that in many ways, women do run things. All over the world, all cultures, we are the backbone. We are the builders and the nurturers. But like Zoe Buckman so beautifully said, it is patriarchy mixed with supremacist ideology that often resists our efforts and erases our contributions. So today, I would like to imagine a world not where women run things, but where women run things without resistance. What does a world where women receive their flowers now look like? And so I invite you, if you want to watch me talk, you can. If you want to close your eyes and imagine, please do. But I want your imagination to be open. I want you to start dreaming up things, seeing pictures about what this will be like. So I have 5 flowers that we can give women to introduce this world. The first is position. The triangle is a special area in that women often find themselves in very influential positions. But I would like to challenge us a bit further. Intersectionality is important. Economic status, lived experience, and disability are all areas where we lack representation. Not all women experience life the same way. And the closer a woman identifies with the dominant class, which is wealthy, landowning, white, cisgendered, heterosexual Christian men, this has an impact on a woman's values, priorities, and consciousness. We must rid ourselves of the binary that to seek out women with intersecting marginalized identities will mean that you won't get the best candidate for the job. The two goals are not mutually exclusive and in fact have been proven to complement each other. So that's one. Resource is the second flower. You see my little flowers?
Yeah.
I'm not as great at drawing as Keith, but I try. So with resource, I imagine that we invest in women with the same confidence that we invest in men. The fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs is Black and Brown women, yet we are astronomically undervalued and lack investment in and financial support. It is absolutely time to change that. In order to give the women who are already building our communities their flowers now, we must move away from the platitudes and the corporate statements and let money talk in the forms of investment and pay equality. The next flower I'd like us to imagine is respect. I wish this would go without saying, but I know many women here in this space know better.
Mm-hmm.
Respect is treating someone the way you want to be treated. It's believing women to be the expert in our own experience. That expertise, as well as our gifts and intellect, allow us to see otherwise ignored problems and create unique solutions. Therefore, put some respect on our name. Treat us like the lived experience experts that we are. I would like to add a statement that I read recently, and it stopped me in my tracks. Dr. Helena Liu, a revolutionary feminist mentor and scholar, said, "For those of us who have never known equality, who have never tasted justice, we can sometimes confuse being used with being respected." Just want to read that one more time. For those of us who have never known equality, who have never tasted justice, we can sometimes confuse being used with being respected. As women, we must use discernment about the invitations we accept. And we should also feel free to revoke our yes when we find that we are not being respected, but instead being used. Whew, I'm gonna let that one simmer for a minute. So flower number 4 is new for me. It's something that I'm exploring right now, and it's pleasure. And I mentioned earlier before we started that there's an amazing new business out of Durham created by a Black woman, and it's called Empowered. And she creates candles that are, which scents are inspired by Black writers and our ancestors. And so behind me is the Audre Lorde candle. And the name of the candle is Resist. And I have been heavily inspired by Audre Lorde essay that I've read recently called Uses of the Erotic, and the erotic is power. It pretty much is about how the erotic should not be relegated to sex, but is a broader sense that is a critical guide in experiencing life fully and achieving greatness and excellence in our calling. I'm going to read this quote. It's a little long, but I'm going to try to condense it just some. The erotic is a resource within each of us that lies in a deeply female and spiritual plane, firmly rooted in the power of our unexpressed or unrecognized feeling. For the erotic, it is not a question only of what we do. It is a question of how acutely and fully we can feel in the doing. The way I see it, it's kind of like pleasure is the conscience of the body. It tells us when something is good for us physically, mentally, and emotionally. I'm exploring this because I was raised in a more conservative household in white evangelical circles. And so the idea of pleasure and listening to one's body is something that is deeply stigmatized, to say the least. And so lately, as I've been exploring my sexuality as a bisexual woman, as I've explored, 10 years into an amazing marriage and treating my depression and anxiety and seeing my partner in a brand new way and all of those things, it's been such an eye-opening experience to feel and choose to feel so deeply, and to not allow my intellect and my thinking to throw doubt into my intuition. And so this one might not be as maybe eloquent as the others because it's something I'm still exploring, but it's something that I'm finding very, very important. And so I imagine a world of pleasure-filled women to be bursting with color and variety, spaces that are nurturing and inspiring, classrooms where children feel safe and excited to learn, and offices that are devoid of fear or creative restriction. So the last flower that I have is freedom. And in this particular flower, this particular space, I'm talking about freedom on an institutional level. For the women in our communities to feel appreciated and supported in all the work that we do, we must fight for their freedoms on a systemic and political level. Reproductive justice, pay equity, environmental justice, housing justice, universal health care, universal child care, labor unions. All of these issues impact women, particularly women of color, more than any demographic. The lack of freedom that women must contend with from a day-to-day basis limits our ability to experience our country as full citizens, and that is unacceptable. It is also a white supremacist myth that involvement in dismantling these unjust laws is the sole responsibility of those most impacted by them. Poet and activist Emma Lazarus, whose words are inscribed at the feet of the Statue of Liberty, said, "Until all of us are free, none of us are free." Until women experience full liberation, none of us will taste it. Those who gain wealth and fame and prominence from the oppression of others are not experiencing freedom, but privilege or advantage. Freedom is inherently human, but privilege is a construct. It means you've created a society that works for some, yourself, better than others. One of the most interesting stories I've ever heard during an interview was with the amazing Mr. Joseph Holt Jr., who is well known and well loved in Raleigh for being a part of the first group of Black children to attempt to integrate Raleigh city schools. And he was talking about his neighborhood of Oberlin. Oberlin was established many years ago by newly emancipated families who were sold lots of land by a Black businessman from the North and a white Union soldier. Those families went on to build homes, a school, churches, and businesses. My friend Mr. Holt told me that in those times where you were invited over to someone's house for dinner, you didn't bring a bouquet of cut flowers, but instead you would look at their yard and see what was missing, and then you would go on your own and pull up the plant from the root and bring it over so they can plant it in their yard as well. That way, the entire neighborhood had the same flowers, the same life and beauty bursting from every yard. I say this because the value of flowers was nearly lost in our collective consciousness. They are seen as pretty, but also expendable. But in reality, kind of like what Zoe Buckman was talking about, they are a critical part of our ecosystem. They are a sign of health and fruit, nourishment, and life. An absence of flowers on a tree that's supposed to be in bloom is a sign of disease and death. So, as I mentioned from the above flowers, position, respect, resource, pleasure, freedom, these flowers, it is to reclaim the environmental element that has been feminized and also frivolized, and remind us all that the feminine, the matriarch, the flowering element of our society is the linchpin of our communities. And these elements are necessary to do the work in a way that is sustainable, joyful, and satisfying. That's what we want to do for the women in our world. Thank you.
Yay. I don't know how many of you have checked out Boss Magazine. It's really beautiful, and just wanted to encourage you, if you haven't, to pick up a copy. I think there's several places around town that are carrying them, and you can also order it online and get a digital copy. Courtney, I wanted to start with this. Volume 4 was an ode to the mothers of Black Raleigh, and I think in you say this really beautifully in this section here, talking about how every generation has to earn it and win the freedom. And there's a lot of thoughts that you shared here, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak a little bit to what is it that our generation can do to help earn and kind of make that freedom happen.
Well, for one, coming off of the new freedom ride that just came through Raleigh this weekend, voting, but not just voting for yourself, because I feel like I'm preaching to the choir as far as the importance of voting, but I would maybe just challenge you one step further to find ways to, encourage the people around you to vote, or encourage the neighborhood next door to vote. Door knocking, grassroots efforts are going to be super important. in this upcoming election in 2022 and possibly 2021, depending on what happens with the city. And so it's really important to not just get yourself to the polls, but get as many people to the polls with you. So I feel like that's probably the most tangible way right now to support the women around you.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Is there anything else from that issue that you kind of wanted to highlight and folks are also asking where around town we can get a copy. I know that Munjo, right?
Yeah, so Munjo, Nice Price Books, their cold soup pop-up is carrying all the issues now. Munjo has the latest issue, and then Black Farmers Hub, which is on Cross Street, by Demetrius Hunter, who's amazing. And he was my very, very, very first supporter as far as a retail outlet. So go see him. And there's some other ones coming, and then also on our website, of course. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
And any in Chapel Hill or Durham or Carbon?
Not yet, but let me know if you want to carry it.
Awesome. Cool. I really love your concept of flowers. And I think you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'd be curious how you arrived at your newest one of pleasure and how you think and also just like sort of how those 5 flowers kind of coexist together for you.
So it came about, I've been thinking about this a lot. It's actually our tagline for Black Oak Society is Give Black Raleigh her flowers now. And that concept kind of came from, it's kind of like a African-American vernacular phrase, give them their flowers. And what it means is essentially you want to honor and uplift and amplify someone who is meaningful to you or to the community before they're gone. The flowers are like thinking about all the flowers that you see at a funeral and the idea that, that person can't see them at that point. And so this idea of honoring them now while they can still see themselves being honored is really important. And Raleigh is a city that is changing so quickly and so dramatically. And a lot of that change includes gentrification and displacement, buildings and structures and families and legacies that are being destroyed and displaced. And being a journalist, I was writing about that part. And then I just kind of realized that I wanted to do something different and commemorative and beautiful to kind of match not just the information, but the soul of what I was seeing. And so that's where Boss Magazine was born. But even before Black Oak Society even existed, when I met those women that day during our gathering, I was like, oh my God, how am I just learning about who these women are? I mean, they've been doing the work since the 70s, and this is the first time I'm learning their name as a Raleigh native. And it really struck me. And so the idea of giving women their flowers now is making sure that we're honoring these women and sharing their stories before they're gone, but also to inspire those coming behind. So really, that's what it is. It's stories, but also, of course, we need to build infrastructure around them and the women coming so that they can do more and be more potent.
That's really beautiful. I love that idea of like acknowledging that in the moment. Thank you for sharing. Jane, I wanted to give you the opportunity if you want to unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask the question.
Hi, Courtney. Yeah, can you all hear me?
Hi, yes. Jane.
Hey, nice to see you. Sorry, I'm in the car.
Oh no, you drive, girl.
Yeah, I love all your words today. Very powerful. And I just wanted to ask more about the voting idea. So with Raleigh right now, the election is potentially delayed 13 months till November 2022. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that change, how it's going to affect voter participation and understanding of local issues that matter to Raleigh residents. That's
a really important question. So there's I am going to put my journalist hat on to answer the part about my feelings about the legislation that could potentially delay, because there's 2 possibilities. The one is that we vote this year on city council and make our voices heard. It's still, coronavirus. It's still, there are people kind of still figuring out the level of contact and that kind of thing that they want to have. And of course, there's the census information. The other side is if we wait 13 months, there are some really, really, really big decisions that are in play right now in the Raleigh City Council that people feel very strongly about on one end. And it seems like the council has a very specific outlook on those things and an agenda on the other. And that could really affect how how quickly those decisions are made and who's affected by them if we wait. But there's also the reality of more time means more time to organize. It means more people coming out to the polls. And also there is the advantage of having our election on even years, because I think it's pretty widely felt that having the city election on odd years creates some issues with turnout. And so that's what I'm going to say about my feelings on it. Either way, I think we all have to do what we can to get as many people to the polls as possible. Raleigh's biggest issue is voter turnout for the council elections. I think the last election was maybe 13%. I might be, around 13%, down from I think 17 from 2 years prior. Also, I feel like we gotta put some pressure on these folks. I think sometimes we kind of give them softball questions. The media, I'm going to poke and prod at them for not pushing and really asking the questions that need to be asked that a lot of people are really concerned about. And also for those of you who are especially new to Raleigh, I would encourage you to find ways and opportunities to get to know people who've been here for a little while, because their experience is going to be a lot different from what you can notice as a newer resident. And they have so much wisdom to share about the history of Raleigh and what's going on. I recently had to sit down with a friend who was newer to the area and kind of laid it all out there for them. And it was like, oh, I didn't realize all this stuff has been happening and going on. I'm new. I'm just glad I'm not in LA anymore. I'm sure a lot of you feel, insert city here. I'm glad I'm not in X anymore. Raleigh's so beautiful, and it is, but you need the knowledge of what has happened to help us to continue to make sure that Raleigh continues to be the beautiful city that you fell in love with when you first came. So
Awesome.
Hope that answers your question, Jane.
Yeah, thank you so much, Courtney.
Absolutely.
Aaron said that thinking of the women in his life, the one that gave him life and the ones that nurtured him and taught him respect and shaped him as a person, he feels like they weren't given the same opportunity to share their voice, their learning, and their flowers. How do we invite and celebrate and pass the mic?
That's a really good question. Aaron also sounds like God, and it's kind of awesome when you talk into that mic. So
I love it, Aaron.
Super cool. So that is a really, really beautiful question. I think on a very, very personal level, for the women in your own world that you feel safe around and have a good relationship with, I think it's important for you to personally spend time with them, especially those who are elders. I was very, very blessed to have amazing grandmothers, and I was able to spend time with my grandmother, Grandma Laura, about 2 weeks before she passed away. And I hope to never, ever, ever forget that time, because I was able to just sit with her. There's a picture of us together that my husband took, and her face is so like serious because she's really, really like telling me something. And that conversation, as I recall, was about gratefulness and being grateful and showing people gratitude, telling the Lord you're thankful for each and every day. She's a very, very spiritual and religious woman, but not in a really cool way, not in a judgy way. She was so loving. It was just a love-filled faith that she shared with me. When she passed away, there was such a hole. Like I just never envisioned my life without her around. But what happened, I feel like what she imparted to me was to seek out other elders. So I have made friends. Now I have several grandmothers and grandfathers. I just emailed Mr. Holt and said, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I kind of see you as a grandfather because, you know, when he reads my work and then he'll email me saying, I'm so proud of you, Courtney, you did such a good job. And having folks, I was just with Professor Dallas, who did the beautiful artwork on the cover of the magazine. And she was just saying, I'm so thankful for your work. That means more to me than literally anything else. And so, but it really just took me picking up the phone, calling, asking about their stories, and then using the platforms that I've been given. Monique is one person who's given me platforms to tell so many great stories. I just put them out there. And at that point, they're there, right? Once they're in print, once they're out there, they're out there. And then it happens to be that people enjoyed them. But really, for me, it was about recording them. It was about putting them out into the world and letting people just see how phenomenal these human beings are that they don't really think about often. And so I think that's what I do. Just use whatever gifts you have, Erin, and you know what I'm talking about since we talked earlier, to put a camera on them, to put the recorder out in front of them, even the women closest to you, because we're all stars. we're all stars. We all have amazing stories.
I love that. Thank you. And thank you, Vaishali, for reading that.
Absolutely.
And Monique.
Hi, Courtney.
Hi, friend.
My question for you is, since the theme is matriarchy, and I know you have young kids, like, how do you feel like in this season of your life, your sort of perspective towards advocacy and telling stories has changed or developed? Because I think sometimes with young kids, you kind of tend to go inward versus outward. So I was wondering how your perspective has changed on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I always tell people my kids made me brave. I think before I had kids, well, I know before I had kids, I was, as people say, I was very scaredy. I wasn't ready to use my voice. I didn't feel like taking up space. I remember being pregnant with my first and feeling so out there, you know, like being this, and oftentimes, you know, I was walking around by myself because my husband worked doubles at a restaurant. We were so broke. and so I'm out at the store and I have, you know, my WIC benefits and that kind of thing, just like trying to keep it all together and feeling very, very vulnerable. And I didn't know what to do with that. But between my firstborn and my secondborn, I don't know if it was an extra testosterone, I don't know what it was, but I got like really, really brave. And I wanted to be heard. And maybe it was, you know, the 2016 election. I was just kind of tired of playing small. I also read Coretta Scott King's book, My Life, My Love, My Legacy, I believe is what the book is called. And that's where I pulled that quote from. But reading her words really got my wheels turning about what I could do. And I remembered my love for words and my love for writing. So that's why I just kind of started. And without a bachelor's degree, without a journalism degree, I'm just going to write. It's what I can do. If people don't like it, whatever, I'm just going to do it. And that's what happened. And then I got a really great mentor in my life who just said, just say yes to everything. Just say yes and figure it out later, which is great advice when you're someone who is always overthinking every single time you're invited to do something. And it helped me, that process of putting myself out there helped me gain a lot of confidence. This helped me gain a lot of confidence, Vaishali. So thank you so much for this opportunity, seriously, because I was nervous last night.
You did such a great job. You really did.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if you don't feel very, very strongly about what you're doing, then sometimes the effort to be courageous is much more difficult. But once you find that thing, it's like, whatever, man. I'm being true to myself. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and the rest will work out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I'll end on this one. someone asked if you had any recommendations for women-owned businesses, Black-owned. I think it was women, minority-owned. I'm gonna get this. I have
Oh man.
to reread it. But if you have any recommendations for other local businesses that folks should check out that are owned by women of color.
Oh, so many. What are you looking for? I do want to give a shout out to my incredible friend Victoria Scott Miller. She is the owner of Liberation Station Bookstore, and they actually have a pop-up, not a pop-up, they're like a part of the store now in the Museum of Art
Yes.
in the West Building. And it is so beautiful. And she is so thoughtful with the books that she picks. They're for children. The majority of her books are children's books. She has some for big readers, as my friend says. But they're amazing. They're phenomenal books. And she's always doing a lot of really cool events too. Oh man, there's so many great Juice Bar. I think they're still open on Rock Quarry Road. Is Black owned, woman owned. Malika is amazing, has an amazing story that is also in Welter magazine, but she does like fresh squeezed juices and smoothies and like medicinal plants and herbs and that kind of thing in her business, and also has a lot of great fitness things, and she partners with folks to do that stuff too. So those are the two that come to my mind. There's so many.
And people are dropping suggestions in as well. So there's Clean Bar Soap and Wonder Puff. So if you all have suggestions as well, please definitely drop them in the chat. Thank you so much. We are so grateful to you. I'm going to give you snaps and just an amazing job. Thank you for sharing your flowers with us. That is such a gift and especially very moving. And I'm so grateful to have heard you talk to them today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rashali. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all. And thank you, Creative Mornings. This is amazing. Such a big deal. Thank you so much.